The palace banquet glittered like a world Lena didn't belong in. She moved between sparkling tables with her head down, balancing a silver tray while nobles whispered insults they thought she couldn't hear. Human girl, village servant, barely trained. She swallowed the humiliation. She needed this job to survive. At the high table, King Valerius sat like a carved shadow, immovable, feared, and impossibly still. But Lena's eyes weren't drawn to the king. They were drawn to the small boy beside him, Prince Kale, the mute heir. He sat silently while the hall roared with laughter. His hands curled in his lap, his eyes empty, ignored by everyone. Even the nobles closest to him pretended he didn't exist. Lena's chest tightened. He looks just like my little brother. Before the fever took him, a sudden shove. A servant bumped her arm. Time froze. The tray-tipped .3 crystal goblets tumbled toward the prince. They shattered against the table. Wine splashing across Kale's sleeve like spilled blood. The hall gasped. 1,000 eyes stabbed into her dot. Lena dropped to her knees. "Forgive me, but the prince's face was frozen in shock. Breath trembling, unable to call out for help. Her hands moved before her mind caught up. "Are you hurt?" She signed gently. The same way she once spoke to her brother. Prince Kale's entire body jolted. He lifted his hands, hope blooming in his eyes for the first time all night. "You?" No sign. He signed back, quick, bright, desperate. Lena nodded, warmth rising in her chest. His fingers danced with excitement. "No one talks to me. Only Tutor. You're new? Will you stay?" But the hall had fallen silent. A cold voice cut through the air. "Enough." The vampire king stood. The nobles bowed instantly. Lena went rigid, every heartbeat a drum of fear. King Valerius descended the steps, his dark armor catching the candlelight like midnight steel. He didn't look angry. He looked calculating. His gaze flicked to his son, who froze instantly. Shrinking back into silence, then to Lena. "Where?" the king asked, his voice low and sharp. "Did you learn the language of hands?" "My brother, your majesty," she whispered. He couldn't hear or speak. "I learned so he wouldn't feel alone." Something unreadable passed through the king's eyes. Regret, pain. She couldn't tell. The nobles leaned forward eagerly, ready for punishment. But the king spoke quietly to his steward. "Find this girl's name. Transfer her to the East Wing." Murmurs rippled through the hall. The East Wing, the prince's quarters. Lena's breath hitched. "Your Majesty," silence, he said, though not unkindly. "You will report tomorrow at dawn." Then he returned to his throne without another word. Kale looked at her one last time, his small hands moving under the table where only she could see. "Thank you." Lena bowed her head, unsure whether she had just been punished or chosen. Dawn crept over the palace like a shy guest, its light brushing the East Wing in pale gold. Lena stood at the kitchen doorway, clutching the breakfast tray meant for the prince. Her heart thudding harder than any war drum. Every servant who passed her paused to stare. The East Wing? With the prince. What did she do to gain the king's attention? Lena wished she knew. She knocked softly on the heavy courtyard door. No answer. She stepped inside, breath catching in her throat. Prince Kale sat alone by a fountain, legs crossed, tracing circles in the water with one fingertip. His guards kept their distance, watching him like a fragile artifact instead of a child. Lena approached slowly. He looked up, hope flashing across his face like sunrise. She set the tray down and gently signed, "Good morning." Breakfast. The prince brightened instantly. "You came back," he signed with trembling hands. "I thought maybe the king would send someone else." Lena smiled. "I told you yesterday meant no harm." Kale hesitated, then signed something smaller, slower. People always leave. Her breath shook. She knelt beside him so he didn't have to look up. I won't. She signed softly. The prince's hands hovered uncertainly before he finally reached for a pastry. Lena noticed a slight tremble in his fingers. The way he watched her to see if she would flinch. She didn't. They spent the morning together. She taught him signs for bird, tree, and sun. He showed her a little wooden dragon toy he kept hidden in his sleeve. For the first time, Kale looked like what he was. A lonely child desperate to be understood, but unseen eyes were watching. From the balcony above, King Valerius stood perfectly still, observing everything. His arms were crossed, but his expression was unreadable somewhere between suspicion, longing, and something deeper he refused to name. He had seen his son smile. He hadn't seen that expression in years. The steward approached quietly. "Sire, shall I dismiss the girl? Replace her with a trained tutor to avoid attachment." Valerius didn't look away from the courtyard. "No, but, Your Majesty, leave them," the king said softly. His fingers tightened on the railing. Watching Lena kneel beside Kale stirred memories he had buried centuries ago of Kale's human mother, of gentle hands and warm laughter, of softness he no longer remembered how to give. "You're growing too attached," he warned himself. But the truth cut deeper. His son had connected with her faster than with any tutor he'd ever hired. Later that afternoon, as Lena walked through the hallway carrying linens, two noble women cornered her. "Well, if it isn't the little human who charmed the prince," one sneered. "Imagine being promoted because you spilled wine?" Akina bowed her head. "I didn't charm anyone. I'm only doing my duty." "Oh, sweet girl," the other said mockingly. "The king doesn't bring humans close without reason. Be careful. When he loses interest, he discards people like broken glass." Their laughter trailed behind them like poisoned perfume. Lena pressed her back against the wall, swallowing the sting. She had no power here, no voice, and the last thing she wanted was attention. But she had promised Kale she wouldn't leave him alone. That night, as she returned the empty tray to the kitchen, a presence filled the doorway. The air grew colder, heavier. King Valerius stood there. Lena bowed instantly, pulse racing. He studied her in silence. His eyes, those same storm-gray shadows she remembered from the banquet. "You speak my son's language," he said quietly. Naturally, without hesitation. "Yes, Your Majesty." And he responds to you, "I only wanted him to feel safe." A flicker of emotion crossed his face. "You succeeded." Lena dared to look up. The king seemed conflicted, like a man fighting a war inside himself. Finally, he spoke. "Tomorrow, you will begin assisting him daily. Lessons, meals, walks, wherever he is. You will accompany him." Her heart stumbled. "Your Majesty, why me?" The king's gaze softened barely. "Because," he said, voice low, "you are the first person he has allowed into his world." A pause, and I will not take that from him. Before she could speak, he stepped back, shadows swallowing him as he added, "We will speak again soon." Lena, her name on his lips felt like both a warning and the beginning of something neither of them understood. Asterisk the next morning. Lena carried the prince's lesson books to the garden courtyard, trying to calm the fluttering in her chest. The king's orders echoed in her mind. Wherever he is, you will accompany him. No servant had ever been given such closeness. No human, especially. When she entered the courtyard, Kale's face lit up so brightly it stunned her. He signed so fast she could barely keep up. "You're early." "I waited. I thought maybe you wouldn't come." Lena knelt beside him. "I promised, didn't I?" Kale nodded, relief washing over him like sunlight after years of winter. Their morning was spent learning. She taught him new signs. He traced them in the air with focused determination. His small hands moved like fluttering wings, eager, clumsy, hopeful. When he hesitated, she guided his fingers gently. When he made mistakes, she praised his effort, not the outcome. And every time she encouraged him, Kale's eyes softened with a warmth she could feel in her chest. But the peace didn't last. A tall vampire guard approached, holding a scroll. His crimson cloak dragged across the marble as he thrust the message toward Kale. "Your tutor requests you join formal lessons," the guard announced coldly. Immediately, Kale shrank, shoulders curling inward. His fingers tightened around Lena's sleeve. He signed, tiny and trembling, "Please, don't make me go." Lena's heart cracked. She looked at the guard. "He's not ready," the guard scoffed. "Humans don't advise royalty." Kale's breathing grew shallow. His hands shook so hard he couldn't form a single sign. Lena moved instinctively. She placed both hands gently on his shoulders and signed slowly, steadily. "It's okay. I'm here. You're safe." Kale's shaking eased. He gripped her hand tightly. The guard bristled. "This is improper." A shadow fell over them, a storm in human form. King Waitress appeared behind the guard. His voice was quiet, dangerously quiet, improper. He repeated. The guard stiffened. "Your Majesty, the boy has lessons." "The human is interfering." Waitress didn't spare him a glance. His eyes were locked on his son, on the fear, the trembling hands. The way the boy clung to Lena like a lifeline, and something broke across the king's expression. Not anger, recognition. He stepped toward them. Kneeling beside Kale with a tenderness so unexpected, Lena almost gasped, slowly. Waitress lifted a hand and shaped a single sign, his movements stiff, imperfect, safe. Kale's eyes widened. Breath hitched. Then slowly he touched his small hand to his father's. Lena realized she was witnessing a moment no one else had seen. A king really trying to reach his child. Waitress rose. Voice like thunder, wrapped in velvet. "Prince Kale's lessons will be conducted here. With her, effective immediately." The guard bowed deeply, shaking. "Why, yes, Your Majesty." He hurried away. Kale looked up at Lena, signing shyly. "Father never signs." "He tried. For me." Lena nodded softly. "For you?" When the guard disappeared, Waitress turned to Lena. His expression held a quiet vulnerability beneath the iron mask. "You calmed him," he said. "You understood what even trained tutors could not." Lena bowed. "He only needed someone to listen. A simple thing," the king murmured, "that somehow no one has given him." Their eyes met, not as king and servant, but as two people who had both loved someone they could no longer reach him. A son. Her, a brother. For the first time, Lena saw not a feared monarch, but a man carrying the weight of a kingdom and a child he didn't know how to comfort. He stepped back, voice gentling. "Continue his lessons, Lena. Whatever you are doing, it is working." She nodded, heart pounding as the king left. Kale tugged her sleeve. "He stayed because of you," he signed. "I like when he stays." Lena clasped his hand. "Then I'll help him stay." And as they resumed their lessons, unseen by either of them, the king paused at the archway, watching with an expression that hinted at something fragile. Hope, asterisk, the human girl now teaches the mute prince. The king watches them himself. The prince smiles when she is near. Servants whispered. Nobles glared. Courtiers invented rumors faster than the wind could carry them. Lena tried to ignore the stares. But some mornings, the weight of them pressed on her chest like stone. Kale noticed when she entered the courtyard carrying his writing board. Kale tugged her hand gently. "You're sad," he signed. She shook her head. "Just tired." Kale frowned. then signed slowly. People say mean things. About you. I hear them. Her breath caught. Kale. You don't have to worry about me. But the prince signed fiercely. I do. You stayed for me. Lena's chest warmed painfully with affection. Before she could respond, a tutor approached the one Kale feared most, Lord Renwick. Known for strict discipline and Colderthi's expectations. He bowed stiffly to Lena. Though his eyes held disdain, His Majesty has granted you excessive influence, he said. But future lessons must follow proper instruction, not coddling. Lena's jaw tightened. He responds to kindness. You've seen it, Renwick scoffed. The prince must learn strength, not softness. Kale instantly hid behind Lena, fingers trembling, and something inside her snapped. She signed boldly. Her movements sharp. Strength comes from feeling safe. Kale clung to her sleeve. Renwick's mouth thinned. I will report your interference. Before Lena could answer, the air shifted cold, electric. Warning, King Valerius appeared behind Renwick like a shadow solidifying into form. The tutor stiffened. Your Majesty Valerius's voice was a quiet blade. You forget yourself. Renwick paled. Valerius walked past him and stood beside Lena. Closer than he had ever stood before, so close she could feel the frost of his aura. Yet also the strange warmth beneath it. His gaze moved to Kale, who was still pressed against her side. Did he frighten you? The king asked gently. Kale nodded. Valerius's jaw tightened barely, but enough for Lena to see the storm brewing behind his cold composure. You will not speak to him again. The king said to Renwick. Leave. Your position is terminated. Renwick fell to his knees. Your Majesty, I have served the crown for leave, Valerius repeated, calmer but infinitely more dangerous. The tutor fled. Silence settled like a held breath. Lena knelt beside Kale. Signing slowly. It's okay. He won't hurt you again. Kale leaned into her, small fingers clutching her hand. Valerius watched them, something raw flickering across his features. Not hunger, not power, something Lena couldn't name. You protect him, he said softly. Lena looked up, startled. I care about him. The king's eyes softened at the edges. My son has had guardians, nurses, tutors. Yet none of them could give him what you do. She swallowed. What do I give him? Valerius hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, someone who sees him. The wind rustled the garden leaves. Carrying the weight of that truth, Kale tugged Valerius's cloak weakly. Signing, stay with us. The king froze. Centuries of walls trembled. Then, slowly, he knelt beside his son. I will stay. He said. It felt like the world stopped. Lena looked between father and son, one searching for connection, the other desperate to be understood. For the first time, Valerius didn't sit above them on any throne. He sat on the ground beside them, letting Kale guide his hands into clumsy signs. Lena gently corrected the king's fingers. Their hands brushed. A spark. A breath Valerius drew in a quiet inhale, as if surprised by something as simple as touch. Kale giggled Dan, almost sound. When his father finally formed the correct sign, together, Lena's eyes stung. Not from fear, from hope. The king rose at last, but his voice remained gentle. Lena, walk with us this evening. I believe my son would like that. Kale nodded so hard his hair flopped. Lena bowed, flustered. If you wish, Your Majesty. But the king shook his head faintly. Not because I wish it, he said, because he does. And as he walked away, his cloak trailing like nightfall behind him, Lena realized something else, for the first time. The vampire king wasn't only guarding his throne, he was guarding his son, and perhaps Without meaning to, he was beginning to guard her. Evening descended like spilled velvet, draping the palace halls in soft shadows and amber torchlight. Lena waited at the entrance of the moonlit garden, palms sweating against her apron. She had never been summoned for an evening walk with royalty, much less with the king himself. Kale arrived running, cloak fluttering behind him. He signed excitedly, "Come." Father said, "We go when you come." Lena laughed softly and followed him inside. Moments later, King Valerius emerged from the archway. Dressed not in armor, not in formal robes, but in a simple, dark tunic. The closest he had looked to mortal since she'd met him. When his eyes landed on her, something gentle flickered there. "Good," he said, voice softer than dusk. "Shall we?" The three of them walked beneath glowing lanterns strung between ancient trees. Kale darted between flowers, signing each name he remembered. Lena praised him at every turn, and the boy glowed like sunrise. Valerius watched them quietly, hands folded behind his back. Expression carved from centuries of restraint, but his eyes kept drifting to Lena. She felt them, a strange warmth, a stranger ache. For a long while, they simply walked in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. It felt peaceful, almost like a family. Until a voice shattered the moment. "Well, this is unusual." A nobleman stepped from the shadows, Duke Aramir, cold-faced and dripping arrogance. He bowed shallowly to the king, but didn't hide the disdain in his eyes. "Your Majesty," he said, "the council is concerned." The servants whispered that the human girl, his gaze slithered to Lena, is receiving privileges reserved for high-born caretakers. Lena stiffened. Kale grabbed her hand instantly. Valerius's expression darkened. "She is here by my order." Aramir's lips curled. "Forgive me, sire." But allowing a human to guide the heir's education, Kale stamped his foot and signed sharply. "She stays. She listens. You don't." Aramiri blinked, confused. "I don't speak his. That is precisely the problem," Valerius said quietly. Aramir's eye twitched. He lowered his voice, venom threading through it. "Be careful, Your Majesty. Humans become liabilities. Attachments lead to weakness. You know what happened with the late Queen Valerius, moved so fast the air. A itself recoiled. In a single heartbeat, he stood inches from Aramir, his aura crackling like frozen lightning. "Speak of her again," the king murmured. "And you will not finish the sentence." Aramir paled. Kale pressed closer to Lena. She could feel him. Trembling, Lena did something reckless, something she didn't know she had the courage for. She touched the king's sleeve, just lightly. Valerius froze. Her voice was soft, steady. "He's frightened, please." The king looked at Hurley, looked, and some icy layer behind his eyes cracked. He stepped back, letting Aramir scurry away. When he turned toward Lena and Kale, guilt lingered on his face like shadows clinging to dawn. "I did not intend to frighten him," he said quietly. Lena knelt beside Kale and signed, "It's okay. Your father was protecting us." Kale nodded slowly, calming. Valerius watched her with something close to wonder. "You soothe him?" he murmured. With a single gesture, Lena shook her head. "He just needs someone to stand with him. That's all." Valerius hesitated. Then softly, "And what do you need, Lena?" The question stunned her. What did she need? No one had asked that in years. "I don't know," she whispered. The king's voice dropped to something almost human. "Perhaps. We will discover it together." Her breath caught. A breeze swept through the garden, carrying petals and something else Lena couldn't name, a feeling blooming between them, delicate and dangerous. Kale tugged both their hands, pulling them toward the glowing fountain. He signed happily, "Sit with me." Both. Lena sank onto the stone edge. Valerius hesitated only a moment before sitting beside her closer than before, their shoulders nearly touching. Kale splashed the water. Giggling silently, Lena glanced sideways at the king. Valerius was watching Kale with a softness she had never imagined possible. Then watching her, the weight of his gaze warm and unsettling. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" She asked, for giving him something I feared he had lost forever. A pause. A reason to smile. Lena felt her cheeks warm. "He gives me that too, Your Majesty." The king's expression shifted. Not a smile, not yet, but something in that direction. Moonlight washed over them, binding them in silver threads neither fully understood. And as Kale leaned against both of them, one small hand in each of theirs, Lena realized something she had been afraid to name. The prince trusted her, but the king was beginning to trust her too. The next morning arrived with attention. Lena could feel before she even opened her eyes. Servants whispered, guards paced with stiff shoulders, and the palace air felt charged like a storm. Waiting to break, she soon learned why. A high council meeting had been called. Nobles gathered in the throne hall, their voices sharp as daggers. Lena kept Kale close as they entered. The boy clung to her sleeve, sensing danger the way only frightened children and hunted animals could. Counselor Dareth stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we must address the influence this human girl has gained over the air." Murmurs rippled. "She oversteps," another noble hissed. "A human should not stand beside a prince. Remove her before matters worsen." Lena lowered her gaze. Heart pounding, Kale squeezed her hand so tightly his knuckles went white. Valerius descended from his throne with slow, controlled grace. He looked carved from ice, but the kind that could crack mountains if pushed. "Speak plainly," he commanded. Dareth bowed, but his voice dripped arrogance. "The girl must be dismissed. The prince is forming unhealthy attachment. It is improper." Kale tugged Lena's sleeve urgently, signing with trembling hands. "Don't leave me, please." Lena knelt, brushing his hair back. "I won't go anywhere," she whispered, though fear crawled up her spine. "Not unless the king forces me." Valerius saw it. Saw everything. The fear, the desperation, the bond between the only two people he could not bear to lose. Dareth continued confidently. "We recommend immediate removal." "Humans are." Valerius's voice struck like thunder. "Enough." Silence slammed over the hall. Valerius walked toward Lena and Kale, slowly, deliberately. His dark cloak whispered across the marble like a warning. When he reached them, he knelt beside his son. Kale stared up with wide, terrified eyes. The vampire king lifted a hand, hesitant, trembling for the first time, and signed, "Safe." Kale's breath hitched. Then the king signed another word. Slow and imperfect. "Stay." Kale threw his arms around him, hugging him fiercely. The hall gasped. Some nobles recoiled. Others looked away, uncomfortable with a king who dared show affection. Valerius rose, keeping Kale's hand in one of his, and turned to face the council. "You speak of improper bonds," he said. "Yet none of you have offered my son anything except fear." He gestured to Lena. She offered him kindness. His voice grew colder. "You offered him silence," a noble stammered. "Your Majesty, surely you cannot." "I can," Valerius said. "And I will." He stepped closer, his aura flaring with quiet authority. "Lena remains," he declared. "By my order. By my right. By my acknowledgement that she alone has reached my son's heart." The hall erupted in frantic whispers. But Valerius wasn't finished. He turned to Lena, really turned to her, like she was more than a servant, more than a girl from a village. "You have given my son what centuries of power failed to give him," he said softly. A voice, safety, joy. Lena swallowed hard. I only wanted him to feel seen. Valerius's eyes warmed storm clouds parting to reveal silver light. He is seen, he murmured. And so are you. Cale tugged both of their hands, signing a single word he had never used before. Family. Lena's breath trembled. Valerius froze. Then he knelt again, pulling Cale into his arms and gently guiding Lena closer. His voice was low, shaken but certain. If you will allow it. Yes. Lena nodded, eyes blurring. Of course. Cale smiled so brightly it felt like sunlight. And for the first time in years, King Valerius allowed himself a quiet, reverent breath of peace. The council bowed, even the defiant ones, because a king who protected his blood was terrifying. But a king who loved was unstoppable. As they left the hall, Cale holding both their hands, Valerius leaned close enough for Lena to feel the warmth beneath the cold. Lena, he said quietly, no one has stood beside my son without fear. Until you. She met his gaze. I'm not afraid of him. A pause. And are you afraid of me? He asked softly. She hesitated, then shook her head. Not anymore. Something unspoken passed between them. A promise. A beginning, and though neither dared call it romance, not yet. Not in this fragile new peace. The bond was there, growing, shifting, rooting itself deep tonight. The kingdom gained something stronger than power. It gained connection, and the vampire king, once feared by all, walked into the moonlit corridor with a new truth in his heart. The human girl who spoke with her hands was teaching him how to feel again.